Yeah, okay, the Gentry Podcast. I know that you will be loving it. We here to break it down so that you start to understand your local government. Who are the leaders? Time to get active, do something about it. Dealing with jobs, the workforce, and affordable housing. Motivate and inspire. Elevate, take it higher. For the next generation. Knowledge is power for your community. Giving you the info that you really need. Time to make a change and a difference. Tune in, don't miss it. It's the Gentry. The Gentry Podcast. The Gentry Podcast. Making a change, switching it up.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Jentry Podcast. Today we have an incredible guest. We have Arthur Jackson, and he is the Chief Development Officer in Cedar Park, Texas. But more than that, he is a award-winning economic developer. He is a sales guru. He is a husband. He is a dog dad, and he is a fellow college football player like myself. I am so excited to have Arthur. Arthur, thank you for coming.
Oh, well, I appreciate it, Jonathan. Thank you for the invite, and you've done your homework. So thank you for the warm introduction.
I appreciate that. No, I'm really excited about this. And you've had, I want to say, non-traditional path, but so many people I speak to have a non-traditional path. But please share with everyone how you got into economic development and how your career path, because it's very impressive.
Yeah, I mean, well, you're so right. I mean, people don't grow up wanting to be economic developers. I think 100% of our society, besides the ones that are in the profession, don't know that this is a career path, and they don't teach that in school. I know there's some colleges now that offer it as a master's degree and things of that nature. But, coming up in high school and college, it's not something that people talk about. But, my path, actually, interesting enough, my first real career experience was spent in economic development. So kind of my journey in thinking I was going to go off and play professional football at some point in my life, like a lot of my friends that I grew up with did. But, I started out in college playing football in Abilene, and then quickly transferred to HBCU called Prairie View A&M University. Had to sit out a year, and so I wouldn't play football. By the time I was eligible, the program there wasn't as great as it could have been. And so I just decided to focus on grades. And so what that allowed me to do is actually take on a student job as almost like a trainee, as a business consultant, if you will, an economic development consultant for what most people know as the Small Business Administration, or the Small Business Development Center, or SBDC, as it's also sometimes referred to as. So if you know anything about that, those are typically housed out of colleges and businesses on campus. And so that was kind of my first introduction into economic development, albeit a very different side of it than what I've been practicing the last kind of, 10, 12 years or so. So with that, I probably got about 6 years of experience working with them, working with small businesses, right? A lot of retail, a lot of restaurant, a lot of entrepreneurs. Focusing on developing business plans, marketing plans, helping them secure funding, learning and helping write grants and going after grant money for small businesses, actually getting to put on workshops when QuickBooks was becoming a big thing for small businesses to keep track of their accounting. And so I got to learn a lot, and a sneak peek behind what it was really like to start a business and help a lot of those entrepreneurs or small businesses in that Waller County, Prairie View A&M area. If you know anything about Prairie View, it's just outside of the Houston metro area. So a lot of good experience there. Fast forward, I wanted to move back home. I'm from the Austin area originally. That's where I grew up, and found myself on the private side, or for-profit side is probably a better word for it, managing, leading sales teams, business development teams in a multitude of industries, from consulting companies to large retail corporations like Sears Holdings, to pharmaceutical companies. And then my last kind of role in the for-profit sector was with a very large company that most people know called NRG. I took that role on August of 2015 and was a national sales director. Thought it was my dream job, had an amazing boss, terrific VP who I work with. So I had a team that was downtown on 6th Street, on Austin, very popular street. So I was in the, middle of it all, right? Great place to be officing out of. And I had a team in San Francisco and also managed a team out in Toronto. So multi-site responsibility. Well, really 3 months into that job, I got the notification that NRG was selling off the division that I was brought in to kind of turn around from a sales perspective. And middle of Thanksgiving, like right before Thanksgiving break and the holiday season, I only been married for 2 years, in the middle of building a home, and they're freaking out a little bit, right? And so I started looking, obviously, immediately looking for roles to what I was doing, right? But in Austin at the time, if anybody's familiar with Austin out there in the audience, Austin has their roots in tech, right? Big tech companies. And so there's a lot of enterprise sales roles out there, right? Whether it was Oracle, Apple, some other high-tech firms. Well, I didn't have a tech background. Right. I didn't have a SaaS background at the time. Software as a service was a big thing. And so people didn't want to hire me at a director level. They're like, well, you've never sold it. You've never been in enterprise sales. You never sold software. But, coming from my background, I thought I could teach anybody how to sell anything as long as I knew the product. It's really all about people, right? It's how you connect them, how you show them the value of whatever it is you're representing and make that meaningful connection, and how it could help their business or them as a person. But needless to say, everybody wanted me to start all over or at the most at a managerial level, right? And so I was a little bit beyond that in my career, being a national sales director at the time. And so I didn't want to take that step back. And so that's how I kind of, again, accidentally found myself back in economic development, albeit on this side of things and not the small business side. And so I stepped in with a group called Opportunity Austin in 2015, that December of that year. I'll end by saying, I always joke, I took an 8-year hiatus in between my 2 economic development careers.
That's incredible. I got to call myself out. If you see me wiping my forehead, I got the flu. The blessing of having a 7-month-old is you're always sick. So I apologize in advance, and please don't take it as I'm not interested, because your path is incredible. Love in there. You knew you didn't want to take a step back. You had gotten to a point in your career, and you felt that your worth was better than what they were offering, and you found where you were celebrated and not tolerated. And I think that's such a incredible message for our listeners. The other thing, now, you definitely didn't take a step back, but there are a lot of different strategic goals and strategic plans and coming to a new role. What were the strategic goals and how have they shifted since your tenure here?
Yeah, so, it's kind of hard to answer that without giving some background on how economic development organizations operate, right?
Sure.
Yeah, so typical economic development organization or economic development corporation, or EDCs and EDOs as we call them for short, we operate on 5-year strategic plans for the most part. And whether or not you're underneath a chamber organization or you're standalone, or you happen to be with a kind of city organization such as myself now in this current role. So I was fortunate enough that they had just went out and did a strategic plan here in Cedar Park, Texas. And so we worked with Newmark, a wonderful group out of the Dallas area, and their site consultants that I go back years with relationships with. So they did that strategic plan just before I actually stepped into this role last April. And so I was, it could be a blessing and a curse. You got a strategic plan that another leader put in place, and another consulting group that they went out and got, which may or may not have been good for the incoming chief economic development officer, leader of that EDC. I had that relationship with Newmark. I've worked with them. And so I was able to look through the strategic plan before I moved forward in the interview process for this role. And there were some things in there I was like, ooh, that's going to be a challenge. Like one of the things in there was building out a life sciences strategy and industry here, right? So life sciences, what that is basically pharmaceutical companies, right? Or medical device, things of that nature. So knowing there's some great things going on in the Austin area, and for your viewers out there, Cedar Park borders Austin to the northwest. So we're literally probably about, depending on traffic, 15 to 20 minutes to downtown Austin. So we're in a great spot to capitalize on a lot of things that are going on in the greater Austin area. And so, again, a lot of life sciences stuff going on in Austin, but when I was looking at the landscape in Cedar Park specifically, I was like, there's no life sciences companies here. How in the world am I going to do that? But I don't want to spend too much time on that. That's just one piece of that economic development plan. But really it all boils down to, for our EDC, is one, what industries do we need to be focused on recruiting? 2, how do we need to look at taking care of our existing companies? 3, we don't have a lot of land left in Cedar Park. We've been the fastest growing community with a city greater than 50,000 in residents currently in the country and in the Austin area. And so we've had a lot of tremendous growth over the years. It's some tremendous groundwork that have been laid by our amazing city management and city leadership, as well as councils before me and economic developers before me. what we're doing is being also very intentional about how we utilize the rest of our resources, right? We're our city management, our city council, we're being really intentional with how we're designing the rest of the land, the water capacity, and infrastructure that we have left to really make sure long term that as we grow from that 82,000 population to long term 120, 130,000 in population, that it's done right and that we have a community that offers something for everybody.
That brings a challenge in itself. One thing when I was researching, and forgive me if I'm wrong, but you guys have one of the youngest downtown areas in the nation.
Yeah, so I'm really trying to promote it as the America's newest downtown. So
Newest
I'm glad you
downtown.
brought that up because it's a really cool project. Again, led by some tremendous city management that we have, three of which are still here. Unfortunately, I think one of the assistant city managers that worked on that project has gone on to lead her own city up in Washington State. But yeah, I mean, that project really started back in, I want to say around 2017, obviously before I got here, but it was again being very intentional with the vision and persistent in that goal, right? So it took the city over time acquiring different properties, whether that was kind of small pieces of land, some were, businesses that may have gone out of business. So that's acquiring structures, right? Existing facilities. And so it literally took them probably close to, I guess, 7 years to really acquire enough property in the area that we're calling the Bell District to really launch this full scale development. And the reason I'm calling it, or we're calling it America's newest downtown is because one, if you know anything about Texas, and I'm sure other states have similar kind of statutes where if you have old historical properties, really you can't touch, right? They're preserved through a historical society, whether that's at the state or, a federal level possibly. And so when you look around other smaller suburban communities in the Austin area, like a Round Rock or a Georgetown, they are very old cities, right? These cities were incorporated, don't quote me on this, but I want to say probably some in the 1800s, early 1900s. Whereas Cedar Park, we weren't incorporated until about 51 years ago, right? We just celebrated our 50-year anniversary as an incorporated city. And so we're a very young city still. And so we never had those traditional town squares or downtowns, right? With these old, beautiful historic properties or city halls or courthouses that you'll see in some of the smaller towns, right? Well, of course, Round Rock, Georgetown, not small towns anymore. Cedar Park, not a small town. So what separated us from those is that we don't have that traditional downtown where we, still had to kind of keep that center of the city. So we could go out and literally have a blank canvas to build a downtown from the ground up. And that's what the Bell District is turning into. So the first piece of that development to anchor it was a state-of-the-art STEM-focused library, 47,000 square feet. It's just gorgeous. It opened last November. And I mean, it sees tens of thousands of people every weekend. I don't even want to know the numbers that come through there throughout the week. And so that's open. But the really cool thing is that, again, being very intentional, we've kept, and the city's kept, green space and greenbelt space and creeks and outdoor space to incorporate into this development. So we're working right now, and this was all done through what you call a public-private partnership, or a P3, right? 3 Ps. And the master developer on that property is called Red Leaf Properties, and they're based here in Austin. And so they're the master planner and developer, of course, working with our city leadership and council and what that vision is. And so phase 2 will come a lot of the retail, restaurant, shops, again, typical things you'll see in any downtown. Then next with that will come multifamily. So we'll have some really nice apartments that come along in the next phase. And then I don't want to say it's kind of phase 3, I'd say maybe phase 2.5 is also bringing in some Class A office development, right? So now you can kind of see the picture in your head that, okay, this is really going to be a downtown. And then long term, I think going into phase 4, there will be for sale properties, right, that you can own, not just multifamily, but there will be some really nice brownstones that are going to be developed on the property as well. But again, all of this is going to be developed there with the intentionality of keeping green space and creek beds and all that stuff around there. But the anchor of that is definitely the library to draw families in.
That's amazing. I know on two fronts, blank canvas is great in the sense that you can truly build out your vision, but it comes with some pressure to make sure that you're also, but I hear it, you're clearly thinking about it very thoughtfully, from maintaining spaces. I'm skipping ahead a little bit, but I'm always curious to hear how people think of maintaining the long-term community member. So for the different phases of life, come out of college, have a job, small apartment, you need employment, to have a small family, maybe single family home, maybe still in an apartment, but now you need childcare, to you've made a little bit, maybe you get into one of those brownstones, and then to through retirement, and then you're looking for a different quality of life. How are you guys kind of thinking that with such a total blank canvas?
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that because, one of the things that I did here was launch kind of really a national kind of marketing campaign, really to tell Cedar Park story, not only of businesses, right, but from a tourism aspect, because that's also under my purview. I know we didn't talk about that when we initially met, but I do run our tourism organization as well. And I shouldn't say run because we have a terrific team. April and Aaron kind of lead those efforts and have done phenomenal. But we're really marketing the city. And so we brought in the PR firm that we're working with. And, they want to come do their exploratory tour of Cedar Park just so they know what they're working with, right? They want to have boots on the ground. And so one of the first meetings that I set up with them was with our amazing city manager who's been here over 2 decades, Brenda Evans, and then also our current Mayor Jim Pennyman Morin. And one of the things I'd never heard them say that before, as much time as I've spent with them over the last almost 12 months, one of the things that they both said was, we're really focused on designing a city for everyone, right? For every stage of life. Not only just for the young families who can't afford to buy a home in Austin, so they move out to the traditional suburb to be able to raise a family, have that yard, a house and a dog, full nine. But what happens when, okay, hey, I'm kind of done working, kids are graduated out of the house. What do we always hear, right? I'm sure you may be at a stage in your life where you got friends or at least acquaintances that have retired, right? What's typically the first thing they do? They sell everything. They're like, we empty nesters, we're buying a house in the Bahamas or something. If you're fortunate enough, or we're moving to Florida or something. And so what Brenda and Mayor Jim were saying, it's like, why does that have to be the case, right? We want to stay around, right? They're getting to that age where their kids are going off to college and they'll be empty nesters over the next, decade or so. And so they're like, why do those people have to leave? We want to make sure that there's something for them to do. And so, that's again incorporating a lot of the retail restaurants and shops that people want to see, the living spaces that are walkable, right? With the multifamily or the brownstones, right? You may still want to downsize when you get to that stage in life and you don't have, 3 or 4 kids in the house and a dog, right? A brownstone that's walkable to some great restaurants, to a movie theater, to the local library that's right there on site where you're not having to get in a car and commute. But that's also a place that's going to draw young people. It's also a place where kids are going to come play. Right, there's going to be park areas, the library is there. And then that's also a place for businesses. And so young people that are single that move out there, they may be living in that multifamily development, but then they can walk over to that Class A office development because they may be working for a company that's in there. So, it's I can't take credit for any of this. I'm just lucky enough that I get to go out and sell it. But again, I just go back to our city management and our council and even people that came before our current council and city management. The foundation has been laid. And again, it's been very intentional, and it's really a place for everybody.
So much humility. I appreciate that. And I know you have done a ton of that work to make sure everything is going smoothly. Now, I want to ask, is there anything that you're super proud of recently? And I've actually seen some news coming out of Cedar Park that was pretty impressive. I don't know. It doesn't have to be something that's that big. Just any initiative, program, or large business coming to Cedar Park.
Yeah, so we've had several very big wins since I stepped in last April. And again, I can't take credit for that. We have a great team. And again, our city leadership makes it easy for us to do our job, right? I mean, that's the first thing with city leadership or a board, right? You don't want to get in the way of the team doing the work. So again, they make it pretty easy for us. So, going back to April, May of last year, we had the announcement of a a semiconductor related company called Ecomicron that relocated their headquarters here in their kind of pseudo manufacturing facility from San Jose, California. So I kind of kicked everything off. And then from there, we've also had the announcement of two life sciences companies, one very big name called Innovis. They're a global, billion-dollar company in revenue, over 6,000 employees worldwide. So that's actually a huge one for Cedar Park because it's our first, and I don't want to demean any of our existing companies because they're all great and they've grown like gangbusters and are going to continue to be successful and we're still supporting them. But it's our first kind of out the gate company that was, already well established, publicly traded. And it happens to give us that credibility going back to the strategy discussion that we had earlier in the life science space. And so Innovis is here. They're taking 100,000 square feet in one of our new kind of advanced manufacturing areas in the city. And then we had a smaller yet very important announcement of Zeteo Biomedical, another life sciences company as well, taking a smaller footprint with about, 15 jobs there versus Innovis's 162 jobs. And from there, we've had a really cool announcement and relocation of call them a material science company, but they're really on the forefront, I think, of our national security right now. So, everybody knows about rare earth minerals, right? I think everybody's heard of that because of really going back to EVs and batteries and all that stuff. But, they're also important when it comes to chips and semiconductors and most of our technology that we use today. And that's no different on the military side and national security, right? And so we get a lot of that stuff right now from overseas and from countries I won't name here. Don't want to start any political situations on your podcast, but, in the government's kind of shutting some of that down. And so now we have to really strategically start thinking as a country, one, how do we mine that here? There's not that many mines. So then you start thinking long term, okay, where else can we get access to some of these minerals and trace minerals? And this company is looking at how do you recycle those minerals from soil, essentially. And so they're looking and working with old industrial sites and things of that nature to take that soil and start recycling some of those trace minerals out of that to put back into the supply chain when it comes to the rare earth minerals. And so those are just some cool creative companies that we've had relocate here. And some other milestones that are kind of outside of the economic development realm that our city leadership has worked on that announced recently as well is we're bringing in our first hotel convention center, right? So if you can believe it, a city like us that's bordering a booming city like Austin, we don't have any full service hotels right now. Over 1,100 hotel rooms in the city, none of them are full service. And so let me back up a little bit. So our city also is home to an arena called the HEB Center, which is a very big and popular grocery store chain here in the state of Texas. And so they're sponsoring the arena, like most big arenas do. So out of that arena, the Austin Spurs play there in our city. So they feed into, of course, the San Antonio Spurs down south of us. And also the Texas Stars hockey team plays there. They feed into the NHL team, the Dallas Stars. And so that's kind of the anchor, but behind that development now is where the hotel convention center is going in at. And the city was also successful in attracting a Nebraska Furniture Mart. And so if people are not familiar with that, it's basically Warren Buffett's version of IKEA. That's kind of the easiest way I can put it to give people an analogy why it's a big deal. So I say it's going to be better than an IKEA. And then we're also bringing in a department store called Shields, which is really building out kind of this, I don't want to say it's new, but the term destination retail, right? So a lot of people may not know about Shields. They're almost like a Cabela's, almost like an outdoor store, if you're familiar with those. But they have an indoor Ferris wheel in a state-of-the-art arcade area. So it's really cool. And I saw somebody put out recently on the news that we will be home to the only indoor Ferris wheel in the Austin area. So I was like, it's just a random weird stat, but when you sit back and think about it, it's like, okay, that's pretty cool. We can maybe promote that. It's random. Nobody cares about that, but, it's something that I think Cedar Park could, market, right? We have the only indoor fair. So we're very proud of that development. Of course, we talked a little bit about the Bell District, but we have more exciting things coming this year. Hopefully, fingers crossed, that will make big headlines in national news. But that's just some of the wins we've had recently. But again, none of that would be possible without the team that I have here with me, our assistant director, Scott Smith, who works all the economic development projects, going all the way down to our tourism folks, April and Aaron, who really promote regionally, driving tourism in our city and putting what we call heads in beds, right? And so making sure our hotel rooms are filled up, people know about our parks and recreation and really overall things that there is to do here in Cedar Park. And so they're the folks that do the hard work. I always say, you tell me where you need me and where you need my support, and that's when I show up. So
it was an incredible update. You guys are really doing some incredible things, and you speak continuously on how it takes a village. It's so many different people, and I know that to be true. One thing I want to kind of double click on is, how do you guys use incentives to potentially bring people to Cedar Park? That could be anything from, certain people use sales tax or TIFs or pilots, or I know that now that coordination is a lot of different people touching it. So just curious how you guys utilize that.
Yeah, so incentives are a tool, right? Especially when you're talking about from a business attraction perspective. And so I always say, and then I'll talk more about how we use that, but there's 4 main ingredients to an economic development deal, right? So the first one is, and you have to really approach them in that order. And I'll kind of explain why. But so the first one is having a site, right? So if you don't have a site, you don't have a project, whether that's a company that wants to relocate or build, or you're looking at building an arena like the HEB Center or a hotel convention center, right? You have to have somewhere to put them. And so then the next kind of phase of that conversation, typically, especially on bringing in an employer for a primary job creator, is workforce, right? So you got to make sure that, one, there's an existing talent pool for the industry that the company's in, but also long-term, how are they going to be able to recruit, or do you have quality education in your area? So 2 is workforce. 3 is typically when, you would like to see a company then approach you about the incentives, right? There's all kind of ways that projects approach it. There's some that lead with incentives, which, in our field is never a good thing, but incentives are typically that third piece. And then the 4th and kind of last ingredient, as I call it, is quality of place or quality of life. So for me, that ties just kind of a pretty little bow on all the other 3 things and wraps it up and really creates what I call that emotional connection for a company or for a project. Whereas, there's tons of great cities out there, tons of great communities, many of which are right here. They're our neighbors here in the Austin area. Some are in other states. But, that said, there's going to be multiple sites that a project's looking at. There's going to be other sites that have great workforce and a great university system and great public education. There's going to be other areas that have tools like incentives to offer. So what's that kind of differentiator? And that's when quality of life comes into aspect. I'll say, I mentioned that incentives is just one tool in our toolbox, not necessarily the most important one, because again, I'll work my way back. So you got quality of life, but without incentives, quality of life is not going to matter to a project. So then you go, okay, you got quality of life, you work backwards, you got the incentives, but incentives are not going to matter if that company can't hire the talent and recruit the workforce. Like, who cares how much money you can give them if they can't be successful as a business there? And then workforce is not going to matter if you have nowhere to put them, right? If they don't have a site to go into, a space, if they don't have the infrastructure, utilities needed, the water, who cares if you have those 3 other things, because then you don't have anywhere to put them. So that's why I kind of say there's 4 ingredients. So we just use incentives to directly answer the question, just as a tool in our toolbox, right? That really is designed, okay, you checked off those first 2 boxes. You got the best site or one of the best sites. You got a great workforce with great university systems around, great public education. Now let's see what we can do to, sweeten the pot a bit and throw incentives on top of that. And so, the way we typically approach it is a cash type of grant is what we call it, but it's always performance-based, right? I think incentives get a misnomer in our society today, whether, at a state level, nationally, as, corporate handouts, things of that nature. And that really could be further from the truth because they're performance-based, right? And so when you look at how cities really operate off of sales tax revenue, right? So it's not just the Home Depot or the corner store, the Nebraska furniture marts to the world that a city brings in that generates revenue for the city, right? It's also businesses that come in and buy or build or lease properties, paying property taxes, things of that nature that also go back into funding the cities. Well, what does that do? That helps create a great police force, great first responders, well-funded fire department, right? I don't know about you, but those are things that I want in my community. If my house catches on fire or there's crime going on, I want to know that I have a fully staffed and well-funded first responders, right? If the city wants to go out and the community or residents are saying, well, we need this road improvement, or we need this bridge, or we need this park development, you don't always want to have to go out and say, well, this is going to cause us to go out and raise taxes or do this or that. That's going to cost the taxpayers money. No, we have businesses that are coming in with their tax that they're paying for the community. We're already well funded. We can go out. We've created a fund and can do that on our own. We don't have to tax our residents more to do some of these things to bring into the community, right? And so when you look at incentives, it's designed to bring in somebody that's going to be a partner to the community, that's also going to be a net benefit when it comes to the tax base for a city, to help fund those things that residents depend on to make their quality of life better. And so I'll get off my high horse with that. And so the way we look at it is when we do agreements with companies, again, I go back to the term performance-based, there's always going to be checkboxes that, hey, you have to hit this and then you'll get this. So for example, if we're looking at a company, let's just say I'll make it easy and quick. So we're doing a $500,000 incentive over, let's just say a 5-year term agreement. One of those checkboxes we may want to see, okay, you're telling us you're going to hire 200 people. Well, once you get to, let's say, your first 100 people, that'll trigger your first payout. And let's just say it's going to be over 2 payouts to make it easy, $250,000. Right. So again, skin in the game. Let's say to qualify for that last payout, we want to see that you're going to meet your capital investment number, right? Meaning your investment in the building, whether you're buying it, building it, there's going to be tenant finish out, you're going to bring in equipment, things of that nature. And so let's say you're promising $10 million in capital investment over 5 years. So we'll say, well, we want to see you hit your first $5 million in capital investment, and it'll trigger that next payout. So that's typically what we call a performance-based agreement, right? So there's skin in the game for a company. They have to promise and they have to deliver on what they say they're going to deliver in that agreement before we will actually give them money. So it's not as if we're just writing a blank check and we're handing out money. That's just not how incentives work in this day and age. That may have been decades ago, but that's not how it's worked in recent times. So hopefully that answers the question for you in the audience. Probably a long-winded answer, but I think it's important to educate society as well, because a lot of people don't get to peek behind the veil in these economic development projects. I think, I feel like these companies just show up in your backyard, or even some of these retail developments, right? I think you alluded to TIFs and TERs, and a lot of those are used to bring in and incentivize retail development and things of that nature, which, our city's done over the years. But that's further from the case, right? A lot of these deals are competitive, and they do want to see a great quality of life. A lot of these retailers will not come in if the housing is not there, right? So you have housing, you have the residents, you have the patrons that can support a large retail center, right? So it's kind of like you're looking at economic development holistically when you talk about building and designing cities. You just can't have business, primary job employer, without having rooftops. Because what do rooftops bring? They bring in workforce. They bring in people that have to have somewhere to live, right? Well, you don't want to have rooftops and somewhere for people to live and work, but then there's nowhere for them to shop, right? There's nowhere for them to play. So you got to kind of have all of these things working together. And obviously you have to look at economic development holistically. It's more than just business recruitment. It's more than just bringing in a restaurant or retail. You also have to look at housing and some of those other things to make your community whole.
Another big one is safety. And I know that's something that you guys do very well. Was there a stat that you guys are one of the safest towns?
Yeah, so back in August, I can't remember who the publication was. Forgive me, whoever that is. I'll have to go back and look at some of my social media posts. But yes, we were recognized as the safest suburban city in the Austin area. And we were ranked 45th safest suburban city in the country. So yes, we're a very safe city. Again, that echoes Chief Harmon, who's our chief of police here, and his team. And I have to give them a shout out because, again, they're the ones out there doing the work to keep this city safe. So again, you've done your homework.
So try my best. I definitely try my best. I love how holistically you think about it, from as early as the education of the workforce all the way through the quality of life. And I also like how your incentives are completely performance based. I think that's a great way to do it. I always ask people, I'm like, how are you tracking them? And a lot of people, or not a lot of people, but certain people don't have a best tracking method, but with yours, the money's not coming out unless you hit these markers. So I really can appreciate that.
And something else, and too, which is not talked about, and we don't widely promote it, but we also have, which also mitigates the risk. There's also, which gets a bad term, but clawbacks in there, right? So if we've paid out money, but you don't adhere to your obligations over that 5-year or 10-year agreement, right? So if something happens where, we met all our initial obligations. We did $10 million in capital investment. We hired, I can't remember how many jobs I said in that example I gave you, but we ramped up and hired everyone we said we were going to hire. But, somehow maybe by year 4, something happens and we end up going backwards and had to lay people off or we shut down. That's not keeping that employment and that investment number for that full 5-year agreement. So then we have the right to, at that point, come back and claw back some or all of that money that we paid out. And so it's not easy. Again, we have an incredible team here, and one group I didn't shout out because they love to work behind the scenes, and rightfully so is our city attorney's office, which we work day in and day out with to craft the right agreement that not only makes sense for the city, but we also want to make sure that our partners, which would be that employer, that company, is also comfortable with that. So they work tirelessly to make sure that the compliance aspect, right, the back end aspect of those agreements are being adhered to.
That's amazing. Sounds like a well-oiled machine over there in Cedar Park. I do want to ask, everything can't be perfect. Are there any challenges that you face, or even just if there was one thing I could just snap my fingers and make my day a little bit easier? I guess just to share with our viewers.
So I don't know. I don't feel like I have a hard job. I guess I'm blessed and grateful to be in a profession that I actually love doing, right? I enjoy getting up, coming to work and meeting with different companies and developers. So I wouldn't say there's something that I could just snap my fingers and say, hey, my job would automatically be easier. But I think some of the challenges that we have here, to your point, it's not all perfect. I mean, we're landlocked as a city, right? So there's only so much growth that we have. So I think maybe one of the things, if I could maybe snap my fingers and say, hey, all of a sudden we, had a larger landmass that we had, so we could do more work in a great city. But that's just not the case, right? I think the saying is God's not making any more earth, right? So that's one. And then, just other resources like water, like a lot of other fast growing states, whether Arizona, California, a ton of people, water is a limited resource. I think we're blessed to have a great public works director named Eric, who has really put I think it's 100-year, don't quote me on that, 100-year water plan together that is sustainable for our residents and the projected growth, again, long-term going up to about 120,000 plus residents once we're fully built out with all of our residential. And so we're in a better shape than a lot of our other kind of partners in the Austin area that are really struggling for water right now. But I would say that, that's still a challenge where, we're never going to be the ones to go out and be able to attract the next, Tesla Gigafactory or Samsung Semiconductor plant. That's just not how we're set up. So while you can look at it as a challenge, I don't. We're a city, again, strategically targeting the companies and the industries that kind of fit our resources and what we have available left here to offer businesses. Hopefully that's probably kind of an answer, but a non-answer at the same time. But, it's not, I won't say it's all perfect. Nothing's ever perfect, but I mean, we're truly grateful to be in a situation where we have the support of city management. We have the support city council. We have a great economic development corporation board that I run, and there's really not a lot of pushback. There's dialogue. Our council gets it. Our city leadership gets it. And so it's just making sure that everybody's on the same page and shares the same vision, right?
I think that was a great answer. Wanting more land and being landlocked. I think you kind of alluded to it in the beginning. You have to be so meticulous on everything that you're planning going forward. And that is a challenge, but also it is that blank canvas where the true artists come out. So I'm very excited about that.
kind of the flip, right? When you think about it, it's, you say blessing and a curse, but it's a curse, but a blessing at the same time, because to your point, it, it almost forces, our city to be intentional with, our remaining land and how we're being developed. And I want to say that was really from the get-go, right? Because I mean, we didn't start out with a ton of land, right? So I think from the get-go, our city leadership and management has had to be intentional. And I think that's just kind of been the culture and carried through, whether, different city councils or different city managers. But I think we've been blessed to have one city manager for, almost 2 decades now. So that helps with a stable, city leadership as well. So, which, you hear about a lot of cities that they have a new city manager every 2 years or so, which is just, it's like whiplash for an economic developer, because, you get one city manager and that's pro growth or pro development. The next one may not be. And so, it's just like ping pong. You really can't get anything done.
Sure. And my last question, this is a topic that a ton of city managers, mayors, economic developers always keep at the forefront. When you're looking for participation and you're looking for civic engagement and the voices of the community, sometimes you only get those people that have a true need. They are traditionally civically engaged, but it may be more difficult to reach the traditional citizen or community member. How are you guys kind of dealing with that challenge of making sure that it's not just the loudest voices in the room, but it's the collective when you're reaching out now?
Yeah. So probably not the best person to answer that question, because luckily I don't have to deal with a lot of that. But what I do know and what I can share is that we have a really great, what we call currently, and I think the same is going to change, but community affairs team, right? So, which is basically the city's communication team. And so they put out a really great newsletter. I think it's called The Pulse. Don't quote me on that. They generally put things in there to keep our residents informed. And so residents are able to have a lot of information early on certain topics and things. And, we also leverage our city council meetings, that platform, where the first piece of that agenda is open communication. So any resident that can come in and have access to the platform to get in front of city leadership, council, and our mayor and voice their concerns, or, a lot of times it could be things that they're excited about in the city, and it's a thank you. Rare, often residents are could be grateful for the work that city government's doing. And so, that offers another platform. But what I've seen from our city council, at least since I've been here, and our mayor, is that obviously they live in the community, right? And so they're out in the community, they live in these neighborhoods. And so again, they can hear what residents are saying. And it really, to me, comes down to communication, right? Whether it's something dealing with economic development, right? If it's a project that's coming through, we make sure that our city manager's office, our city council are briefed, a lot of times in executive sessions, right? Before we're ready to take something public and discuss it and get their thoughts, right? And our city council always asks very thoughtful questions with putting the residents first, right? They're like, well, how is this going to impact that? Well, how is rezoning this or a future land use amendment going to change this development? Or how close is this to this residential neighborhood? So I know quite often when things go up in people's backyards, whether it's Cedar Park or anywhere else, it sort of seems like sometimes that, city leadership or council, whoever it is, doesn't care. But I can tell you here, what I've witnessed is that our city councilors care. They're always engaged in the community. They know about what we're doing. They know about other development that's coming in, and they're able to be informed and have those conversations out in the community before something goes to, a public vote or a public conversation for a particular development. And again, we have a great communications team for the city that keeps our residents informed oftentimes and knows when and how to engage certain neighborhoods in our city to make sure that, while there may still be pushback, right, nothing's perfect, as you said earlier, but at least the residents have the information to be informed on a particular topic or development.
Appreciate it. And Arthur, on the topic of communication, how can our viewers reach out to you or get updates on all the great things? I know you said you got some big stuff coming at Cedar Park. Where can they get in contact with you?
Yeah, so I'm pretty vocal, and saying vocal's the wrong word. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn, so you can find me there, follow me, connect with me if we kind of have similar interests. I try to be intentional about getting that word who I connect with. So sorry if I don't immediately connect back. If I don't see that we're connected with somebody or how you fit into economic development, and it's just a random connection, please don't take it personal. It's just I just find it odd that random people to connect with me on LinkedIn that don't necessarily know me or are in this type of profession or field. So, but yeah, definitely follow or reach out on LinkedIn. Follow our Economic Development Corporation's page as well. We're becoming more active with that. We just launched a new website, so another milestone for our city. Not to knock anybody before me, but the website was just it needed to be redone, and it hadn't really been touched since it was launched. Which I'm sure was really great back when it was launched, I think in 2019, but it just needed a refresh. So we've launched our new website, so we can definitely direct people there. So that's Cedar Park, Texas, EDC.com or .gov, so they can go there. Or if they want to email me and it doesn't get caught up in city spam filter, it's arthur.jackson@cedarparktexas.gov, and they can reach out. So any businesses, anybody interested in relocating a company or growing a company, definitely reach out. If we have time, there's a couple of things that I didn't mention that would be remiss of me on really cool milestones or companies that
Please do. Please
one of
do.
the other big announcements early last year before I started, the city brought on a open innovation platform in a company called Plug and Play. And so they're headquartered out of Sunnyvale, California. We helped open their first office ever in the state of Texas here in Cedar Park. And so what they do is they help startups, VCs, and larger corporate companies get connected. Right. And so what they've been doing for us is really creating another piece of economic development that we didn't get to talk about, which is the innovation side. So I always kind of give the story of, economies of scale, cities didn't grow on the backs of Fortune 100 companies, right? You look at Silicon Valley, right? Before then, there wasn't an Apple, there was no Google, Alphabet, so on and so forth, right? And so how did Silicon Valley become what it was today? It was on the backs of innovative companies and startups. And then you kind of fast forward and look at Austin and how Austin grew. It wasn't because they were out recruiting the Fortune 100 companies off the bat, right? They were growing small startups, and you can go back to 1968 with IBM. When they recruited IBM, nobody knew what a computer was. 1960, I'm pretty sure, except for the people at IBM and some of those companies. And so, Austin recruited them, and you fast forward through the 70s and 80s, and you had MCC, which is a tech communications company that started here in the Austin area. Then you fast forward to the late 80s, early 90s when Dell got up and running. And then all of the small startups that spun out during the dot-com era, which really kind of helped put Austin on the map to a large extent from a tech perspective. And then Austin, right, they looked up and said, okay, how can we go out and recruit more companies that have been successful in other states to get a presence here, right? And so you saw in the early 2000s, them started actively recruiting, those other startups of the world out in California, like a PayPal, a eBay, but even a Facebook, now Meta, right? A lot of those companies still in the early mid 2000s were still small startups. Google, the first tweet was actually sent out from South by Southwest here in Austin. Right. So it's just little things like that. But Austin wasn't out recruiting the Samsungs of the world that were Fortune, 500, Fortune 100 companies. They laid the foundation with innovation. And so it's important that we have that aspect as well here in Cedar Park, and Plug and Play helps do that for us. And that's also part of the strategy, our 5-year strategy that I mentioned at the beginning of the program. The other two things that I want to mention was Firefly Aerospace, probably one of our greatest success stories here in Cedar Park, which is an aerospace company that actually just launched their first satellite up into orbit that will be landing on the moon, I think around March 1st. There's supposed to be a big celebration here in Cedar Park. But again, going back to the startup scene, and this was before me, so can't take any credit for it. The city recruited them here when they were maybe, I guess, 10 people, and I may have some of the story wrong, but about 10 people, I think, maybe work out of a garage still. When you think about a space company, building rockets now. And so the city went out on a limb and actually incentivized the company to, establish their headquarters here, grow their manufacturing operations. And then you kind of fast forward and they're like, well, we need somewhere to test these rockets that we're going to be launching into space. Well, we're a pretty dense city, even though we're a suburban community. And it's like, well, you're probably not going to be testing rockets in Cedar Park. And so, but what the city did and economic development team did at the time was work with them and partner with a neighboring community about 30 minutes north of Cedar Park in a more rural area of Texas called Briggs, Texas. And so fast forward to like the last couple of years or 24 months or so, Firefly has built over 300,000 square feet, give or take, out there, what they call Rocket Ranch. And I think they have about 6, and I think maybe they built 1 or 2 more since, but 6 or 7 what they call test stands that basically where they have their large rockets on these test stands and basically fire them up to test them. And I think they even do maybe rocket jumps is what they call them. So a rocket hop. So they actually kind of hop the rocket, but have it tethered down so it doesn't actually go into the air. So that's a really cool story right there. And, we've been with them through and through ups and downs. And it's one of those feel-good stories, even coming about incentives, right? When the company was kind of facing some struggles, we will work with the company. Right? We don't initially go to, hey, you didn't hit this hiring goal or you didn't hit this capital investment. We're going to take this money back from you. We say, we constantly check on you and say, hey, are you okay? We do our due diligence when it comes to the compliance of those agreements. And if we need to work with this company to go back before our council and our board to amend that agreement because they may be going through a challenging time or the economy may have taken a downturn, we will do that. And we had to do that with Firefly at one point in time. And now you fast forward to where they are today with over 700 employees now and still growing and needing to expand. So that's a really great story. And then another similar one is a company called Hyliion, which initially, came here. I think they were kind of incubated, kind of similar story out of a garage up in, I want to say Pittsburgh. Well, the CEO and founder was kind of, I guess, ready to get out of the snowy Northeast and decided on Cedar Park. We incentivized them and they've had their ups and downs. They initially were in the kind of EV market and commercial kind of electric trucking space, right? And charging space. And we all know what's kind of happened to the EV market. Unfortunately, it just hasn't taken off the way I think a lot of people thought it was. So they've had to make a pivot on their business model to go after new technology. And so one of the things that they've recently done is acquire a technology from GE, from General Electric, called the Carnot device. And I'm probably going to completely mess up what it is, but essentially it's a generator that, long-term that's going to be designed to hopefully self-sustain buildings and facilities, right? So when you have for example, all the talk is around data centers, right? How are we going to power data centers, especially with this whole AI boom? We're going to need more cloud computing, et cetera. Well, we already know what's going on across, the world, the country. There's not enough power. There's not enough electricity. So do we go nuclear? Do we try to figure out some other kind of way? Do we try to find a green energy? Well, this Carnot device will actually be kind of a almost powering generator for a lot of these facilities where they don't necessarily have to be full-time on the grid. And so it's a fascinating technology with Hyliion to start mass producing that technology as well that they just acquired from GE. And, you may see that that's going to be the future and the fix for a lot of our long-term power generation demands for some of these facilities being manufactured right here in Cedar Park, Texas. So there's some really cool companies here. Again, going back to that innovation piece to tie it back to the plug and play story. These were 2 like small startups that, were started with an idea out of a garage and they were able to grow up hundreds of people right here in Cedar Park.
Nice. I think that's a great way to balance it out. You guys are obviously bringing in a lot larger companies to start with, but you're also retaining and growing businesses. And I like how you stated that innovation economy is in you guys' blood, being so close to Austin. I think that's a great way. You always want to be able to bring in big companies, but I think it says a lot when you can partner with somebody through the ebbs and flows, as we all know, in business and see them go from startup to shooting rockets in the air. So that's definitely great. Well, Arthur, is there anything else you'd like to share?
I think you've covered a lot. We've covered a lot. I've probably taken up way too much of your time, and hopefully your audience wants to sit through the entire program and it's engaging enough. But I appreciate you reaching out. Thank you for your time, and I'll look forward to seeing the podcast and also the success long term of the other shows I know you've already recorded, and look forward to seeing those air. And let me know long term how I can support you and your audience. And if you're interested in ever having me back, I'll be delighted to.
That definitely makes me happy. You definitely will get an invite back. This was an incredible episode. I learned a lot. I know our viewers definitely will learn a lot. Arthur, I appreciate you. I'm super proud of everything you're doing in Cedar Park. And until next time, this is the Jentry Podcast. Thank you.